but also there's that human element where you have to have what I just call a pain tolerance, because I think sometimes people think, well, this should be working. I've made it to X millions of dollars under management. We shouldn't be having this issue. It should be working. But I think the thing that Ryan and I are reminded of constantly, whether it's 50 million or 500 million, is really every day is new. Every environment is new, and it brings new elements, and to approach it more or less with a posture of intrigue than frustration. Because I think if you almost look at it as an element of frustration, you may not approach it with the zeal and energy to solve it systematically. You might just try to get past it, and then that little small thing becomes a big thing down the road.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Kingdom REI podcast. This is your host, Ellis Hammond, founder of the Kingdom REI Mastermind, and another very, very, very special guest. I cannot wait to introduce you guys to this wonderful woman, co-manager of Elevation Fund, Mrs. Jamie Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with you.
So we got a little competition today, Jamie. I don't know if you know this.
No.
So your husband, Ryan Smith, has been on our show in season 1, and his episode is in the top 10. And so it's my expectation that this is going to be 10 times better. And so we need to make sure we beat that episode. So guys, if you're listening and we want to beat Ryan Smith, make sure you share this episode with a friend or put this on Facebook or LinkedIn and let everyone know, hey, we got to go beat Ryan's episode. So there would be nothing I think Jamie and I would like more to be able to go back to Ryan and say, hey man, we beat your show and that we did in season 1.
A little friendly competition. I like it. Yeah.
So, all right. So Jamie is the co-manager with Ryan of Elevation Fund. You guys are been doing this business, I mean, in the OG of mobile home parks and self-storage facilities, at least to a guy like me. I mean, you and your husband started Elevation Fund how long ago was this now?
What became Elevation Capital Group, which is I think what you're referring to, really started back in the 2003 timeframe. So it's coming up on 20 years, I guess, now that I think back on it.
Wow. And current assets under management, you guys are managing about how much now?
We're just about to add a $33 million asset on Friday. So these numbers, change over time, but I think it would be safe to say an approximate over 600 million in real estate assets.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I remember Ryan saying something, when we first recorded that, when you started, maybe I'd like to hear this from you, was 600 million the goal when you first started, or does that seem just out of another world? I'm curious to get your take.
Yes, no, that is a good question. No, 600 million was not the original goal by any means. I think, when we got started, and Ryan probably said, our goals were really, really simple. We wanted to create $10,000 a month of net income from our real estate. And then our long-term goal was $50 million in real estate under management. And that was our goal way back when we first got started. So yeah, it has gone beyond that.
Yeah, I think you guys reached it. Well, so there's so much I want to learn from you today. I'm excited to jump in. If you wouldn't mind, Jim, I just want to pray for us. And clearly there's a ton that our audience can take away from this show today. So let me just pray and ask God to bless it. Lord, we thank you for today. Thank you for Jamie. Thank you for the way that you have blessed her and their business and their family and just the light that they have been to so many, including me, including our community. And I just pray that even today would be an extension of that as we get to learn from her, experience her wisdom. Lord, we love you. We thank you. It's in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So I'm curious, Jamie, take us back to you a little bit before Elevation. The entrepreneur in you, where does that come from? I mean, the desire to want to grow and build a big business like this, and maybe that wasn't the case at first, but now you guys clearly have built a pretty large enterprise. Where does that stem from? Was that always a desire? Tell us a little about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably always been in me in terms of just a natural desire to work, a natural desire um, I would say probably in summary, to be entrepreneurial, to be able to make decisions on my own, and to be able to benefit from my own work ethic. I was able to discover that at a really early age. Um, the difference between being an employee and being a business owner, just watching even my parents. So when I was growing up, my parents would, blue collar, very hardworking, and we would build houses and sell them every couple of years. And that was something that we would do on the side to my dad's primary job. And so I just remember being out there on the side, and I could run the wet saw at like age 7 and help lay tile and all of that. And to be honest, and I could, when the workers were done at the end of the day, instead of paying extra, we would go through and clean the site ourselves and put the debris in the dumpsters. And I just remembered, I loved it. I think sometimes people think, oh, whoa, is that, what was that like? And it was really, really hard work, but I was really attracted to it. Just the ability that if we work hard, we can finish the house on this date instead of 30 days later. And, we could sell it, if we save here, we can sell. So those just kind of that natural interest in how to build a business, I think was really there at a young age. And so started there. And then fast forward, just to kind of go quickly, when I was in college to help pay for my housing, I got a job in property management. So it was a 300 site apartment building just off campus of UCF in Orlando. And then that same type of thing, I remember thinking, okay, I'm renting the units, I'm showing the units, I'm helping with the leases, I'm helping run the maintenance crew, I'm taking in maintenance requests, I'm collecting rent. And I loved it. And I thought, man, I could do all this if I could own something myself. I'm making this gentleman a handsome profit, and I was happy for him, but I thought, he's never here. And I'm here like almost every day. I'm, here. So I think just that natural appetite to build and run my own business, and also knew that I had what it took to do it. But I'd rather, instead of be on the employee side, be on the owner side.
That was the real estate bug for you. So that was kind of the intro of like, why am I working for this guy when I can go do it myself?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then so the idea of kind of beginning to, I mean, you're an author of the book Trailer Cash, right? That's the official name of it, yeah. So did trailer parks, as they were called back in the day, which is I don't think appropriate anymore, right? We call them mobile home parks, or so was that something that you and Ryan kind of came to together, post married, or where did that idea to kind of begin to build Elevation?
Yeah. So I guess maybe anchoring back for a brief moment to the property management in college, I quickly thereafter decided to buy my first single family property when I was in college. So I started, and then I'd rent out the other rooms and, all of that. So before Ryan and I were married, he was investing in single family residential real estate, and then so was I. And then when we got married, we both continued with our single family residential acquisitions, got maybe 25, 30 single families, which brings me to your question, which is, where did the idea of investing in mobile home parks come from, or mobile home communities? And it really was just born out of some simple analysis. We thought, to get to where we want to go, this single family residential business is just not scalable. It's not going to accomplish our goals. It'd have been fine if we just wanted to own those properties and let them go through retirement. But we thought, okay, what's the best? We want to scale, but what asset class should we go into? And that's where we sat down and we analyzed, apartment buildings, elderly care facilities, billboards, commercial, industrial, mobile home parks, store, you name it. We really ran the numbers on all of the multi-unit or commercial assets that we may be interested in. And really, based on just some simple cash flow analysis, it came back that the best cash on cash return or best return on investment would be in the mobile home park space. So we really just kind of looked at we looked at the landscape and ran the numbers. Those were the ones that came back that were the most attractive to us for our purposes. And that's when we started buying mobile home parks.
Huh. Let me ask you this question. So we've been talking a lot on like our live show and stuff about becoming the CEO of your business and really being able to like set up early on to be able to grow and scale. And, even though your goal was 50 million, like, I'm curious, and there's a lot of investors and early investors and maybe have not got the 500 million mark yet, but want to get there or at least want to, because I think so many people get into this world of real estate, Jamie, with the goal of financial freedom. And yet they just kind of create, like, they never really get to be able to build a portfolio or business big enough to really accomplish that. Clearly, you guys are way past the financial freedom point where your needs are met and you're able to even have a much larger impact on your community and stuff. Like, and I know this is your sweet spot, which is why I'm so glad like we have you, right? I mean, there's so much you see Ryan's face a lot, but we know, like, I've been to your office, right? I know who's running the show. So, like, what did you guys do early on? I'm curious, that would be helpful for our audience in thinking about really setting this up, any investment endeavor, to become an enterprise and not just, hey, I own this real estate portfolio of mobile home parks. Was that intentional early on, or was that something that you, of course, developed as you went? But explain to me that process as I'm trying to learn. I know so many others are trying to learn. If I wanted to get to 500 million or just 50 million, but maybe on my way to 500 million, where did you start and how did that begin to develop as you went on?
Right. No, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that question in terms of, how do we run the business like a business? And also you want it to be profitable, properly profitable. I think a couple things that I've seen in errors that can be made early on is there's an initial goal of financial freedom, most likely, that you referred to. And I think sometimes people can be too eager to get to that, um, rather than focusing on the business as a business and what can this particular asset do. So, to be a little bit more specific, if you acquire a property and it needs reinvestment, or it needs it needs a little bit more of a runway to grow and get the numbers to where they need to be. If someone's not relying on that business for all of their income, they have the freedom to exercise essentially their better judgment as to what's best for the property. So you've got that on a small scale. And so I guess what I might say there is, someone's getting started, and I always encourage this, and I always have, and Ryan and I've done it ourselves, is we want to make sure that we've got other sources of income so that you've got the financial freedom. So instead of jumping from, hey, this is my job, and I want to get out of that job for reason A, B, and C, and then you jump onto a lily pad, which is this property, and then that property may be getting suffocated, perhaps because the owner is trying to rely on it from a cash flow standpoint, that the property really perhaps shouldn't be at that point, or it can't be reinvested in so it can maximize.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Wow.
So that's an initial comment, because I've seen that happen a lot, and I understand why it happens, but it's almost showing that restraint so that you've got your income needs met and that you can treat that property or that business in the way that it should. And then I think probably the longer term answer that you might have been getting at as well is, that's something that I see that happens early on. And then partly because of that desire to grow and to get to whatever that AUM target might be, folks might acquire at a faster rate than they perhaps should, meaning they haven't got their systems in place, maybe from a property management standpoint, from a fund management standpoint. They don't have all their ducks in a row, but because they're so focused on, I want to get to this certain AUM by this date, they might accelerate their growth at a rate perhaps that's a little faster than they should. And then it puts undue pressure on the business and puts other elements of the business at risk. So maybe my summary comment on that is, and we all know it, is just that patience and that steadiness. Even if it takes you a little bit longer to get to where you're trying to go, but you've done it right, you're going to be way better off than cleaning up the little messes that happen when you acquire in a rush.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on there too is just like you talked about building the systems and processes as you go. I mean, I think so many investors don't build those systems. Like, it's that they're just kind of supposed to work themselves out. And so you've built a replicatable system for the way you acquire and onboard investors and, turn over, tenants or whatever it might be. So I think that's a huge piece is, are you building systems as you go? Was that something you knew from your education, like how to build systems process? Because I find that to be difficult, even for a guy like me, a visionary, a driver, learning now. I have to build a team and systems and process around me. Is that your strength, or is that Ryan's? Who did that best early on?
That's a good question. I think that we both, I think to be fair, we both bring that to the table. Ryan is very systematized. He has a computer programming background also. So his mind will naturally see processes that need to be put into place. And I think that is been hugely valuable to us. But also there's that human element where you have to have what I just call a pain tolerance, because I think sometimes people think, well, this should be working. I've made it to X millions of dollars under management. We shouldn't be having this issue. It should be working. But I think the thing that Ryan and I are reminded of constantly, whether it's 50 million or 500 million, is really every day is new. Every environment is new, and it brings new elements, and to approach it more or less with a posture of intrigue than frustration. Because I think if you almost look at it as an element of frustration, you may not approach it with the zeal and energy to solve it systematically. You might just try to get past it, and then that little small thing becomes a big thing down the road. So definitely a pain tolerance. I think that, for whatever reason, both Ryan and I naturally have high pain tolerance.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to. Like I always talk about, like that first years of entrepreneurship, like if you're not willing to bang your head against the wall, and deal with some pain, you're probably not ready. I mean, I just love, there's such a glorified idea of entrepreneurship these days. And it's just like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Uh, so, I mean, it's fun, but it's not easy. That's for sure.
Right.
And I like, and I think, there's an element of risk that, you kind of have to enjoy as an entrepreneur too. So, all right. So gosh, let's keep rolling, because there's so much about you that I think I don't always have the privilege of interviewing someone who's such a powerful business-minded person, but also an incredible mom and wife. You have 4 young kids. I mean, your oldest kid she's 8 years old. So to think like you guys have built this with 4 very little, wonder. I got to hang out with you guys a couple months ago, which was so sweet. I want to know more about that, and I think some of this is personal because, me and my wife, we just had our first one. We're talking about, does she come into the business now? Do we keep that separate? But I think there's also just a lot of women maybe listening to this show and thinking, hey, I want to be a mom and I want to grow a family, but I'm also business minded and I want to grow a business. And so
Yeah.
what did that decision look like? Was that a decision you had to make? Was that always, hey, I know I'm going to do this? Like, walk us through that journey.
Yes, no, it is for me. I always felt called. I always had an appetite for business, so I never felt like I that I would just. And I'm the daughter of a stay-at-home mom, so I admire them, and it is a tremendous responsibility. So I had the benefit of being raised in that way, and for some reason, I just always had an appetite for business. And for any of your listeners that are following along, I will say this, that I do believe I know the Proverbs 31 woman does some real estate transactions. So I guess I always felt comfortable being in real estate.
That's awesome.
But I'm just, but so Ryan will always say this as well. He always wanted to work with his wife, and that was before he even knew who I was. That was just something that he wanted to do even as a small child. And I always had an appetite to work. So I think probably when we met, we talked about our mutual interests, and then got engaged and got married. It was always on the table for us that we would work together. And so it was not much of a conversation. But I will say for the women that are listening and that are perhaps interested, I think entrepreneurship is a huge answer to women that want to be mothers, because it gives us, it's absolutely got work and effort, but it allows us to have more control over our schedule and be much more dynamic with our availability. And in that, I've always felt a quiet confidence that I know that what I'm able to teach and share with my children, even at this young age, and then over time, I actually have real life valuable skills that I can teach them through the business as well. So I find that attractive as a mother, that I've got useful skills that I can transfer to them, regardless of what direction the kids may go in their lives.
Hmm. Is any like your oldest daughter, what is does she talk about building, like what does she, I mean, what does she catch from you guys? I'm curious now that she's 10, she's starting to think, I'm sure she's thinking about business, or I don't know, she probably has dreams. What is that right now?
The kids find what we do very interesting. I'll give you one example. So when I travel, and I don't travel nearly like I did before, that was a strategic adjustment that Ryan and I made when we had kids. So, as a mother and a working mother, you do make changes over time. So that's to be expected. So, but when I do go out in the field for property visits, or if I have to let someone go and, oversee training and hiring of new managers and things like that, I always explain to the kids what I'm doing and why. And it gives me a good opportunity to say, you have to really work hard, because if not, someday, someone may go in another direction. You could be without that work. So it gives you a chance to kind of emphasize some of those character values. But I also have a plot map of one of the properties. And so I explained to them, while we're driving occupancy, the kids are able to move pins onto certain plots and say, okay, in July, we added occupancy by 3 units at this particular property. What does that mean? Daddy and mommy were able to help 3 new families become homeowners.
Huh.
So it's just fun, small things, but it's also tangible, because these are properties and homes and families, and the kids can think about how that works.
Right. So let me ask you this. If someone's thinking, let's say there's, I mean, just for me personally, like as me and my wife are considering, does she come into the business, or someone's, let's say a woman wants to become an entrepreneur, but she does have small kids, a young family, you talk about this being a great route, but what should you consider? I mean, what are the sacrifices? Because it doesn't come without sacrifice, right? I mean, that's for sure. Like if you were to, I don't know, speak to your, your 10 year ago self as a new mom, and now that you've built this and you look back to where your kids are now, I mean, what would you tell her? What would be, to get to where you are now and go back 10 years? Would there be some advice that you would say, hey, keep this in mind, or don't do this?
Yeah, no, that is a great question, because I've definitely learned a lot over the last 10 years. And 10 years ago, it was pre-mom. And now 10 years later, I've got 4, little ones, all the way down to 2 years old. I think there's a couple of very key things. One, I would say, would be communication. And I know we've all probably heard that spoken of so many times that it almost can seem overstated, but I don't think I can overstate it enough. So I think communication skills with your spouse. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to be working with your spouse, there's a tremendous amount of information that has to be exchanged on a daily basis and has to be done well and effectively. I think really leaning into that, I guess, would be the best way to say it, so that you learn how to communicate things in a professional way, because your spousal communications can sometimes be casual or have room for other types of nuance. But I think because you're making decisions with such, because of the type of consequences, and some of them need more detailed analysis. So learning how to have that professional type communication with your spouse, if you've never done it before, I think is a little bit of a journey. And I think other things are certainly just time management. So one thing that helps me, and it's helped me tremendously, particularly over the last 10 years, is especially when you have small children, you have an enormous amount of demands on your time. And so you're trying to prioritize what is the most important thing right now. And because you only have 24 hours in a day, and you can't possibly do all the things that are actually being asked of you. So, and I guess this is kind of my go back to that Proverbs 31, but just thinking about it, I had an older, wiser woman, had been married about 50 years, and she and her husband had worked together in a variety of capacities. And she explained to me one day, when you look at the order of your life, it should be God, spouse, children, and then what falls into that community bucket, business, and all of those items. And I think for your entrepreneurs, both guys and girls, if we get our lives out of order, it doesn't matter how good our business is, the rest of our life can fall into chaos. And I think sometimes if we're trying to build a business, we can just focus on those business targets, but let some of these other things go to the side. But I think the thing that's probably helped me the most over the last 10 years is prioritizing my life in that way. And priority doesn't also mean equal time. So it doesn't mean each of those things get equal time, but it means in the order of my life, they've been prioritized in that way. And that it also, then therefore I'm freed up to thrive in my business in ways that I otherwise would not be able to, because I've got things that I haven't taken care of that I should.
Right. Okay, one last, this is just so good. I feel like I have the expert on like mom and business, so I feel like I have to ask you these questions. I hope that's okay. So and I see this as a parent, and now as a parent, sometimes it can be hard to accept help or like get help, and bring in help. But you have other parts of your life, your marriage, your business that you're growing. I mean, for me, for us, and for anyone listening, to really be able to do this, you had to bring in help. In some ways, you're kind of treating your home as a thing that you're running, but yet, I know I was there at your home. You think your mother helping with kids, and so was that an easy decision for you to bring in and like let someone else kind of spend a majority of time with your kids during the day? I mean, talk us through that process, or just kind of how you made a decision, how other people might kind of think about that decision too, if they're growing a business, having kids, that
Right.
whole dynamic.
Yes, no, I think you make a great point in that if you're going to do a lot of things at a high level, you do have to have help, which is the point that you're making. And I think for me early on, just being transparent, I'm more of a person, I'm fortunate to be a high capacity type person. So that can be helpful, but it can also be, there's a point where you have to accept help, which is what you're saying. And so I think that transition for me personally was a good one, but it did take some time. And then I remembered thinking, in our particular case, we've got people in our family that love our family and want to invest in them. And we're able to live this multi-generational lifestyle that's a benefit to our children. It's a benefit to our parents, and it's a benefit to us. So while I think like anything, it comes with some complicated elements. Just when you're working with, anytime you add a new person to the mix, you've got new things you have to navigate. But I think in our case, what it's added to our family as a whole, like I said, across all generations, we just feel like we're just living in this precious sweet spot that we couldn't really ask for more. So
I love that idea, like the multi-generational. I never really thought about that in the terms of like, yeah, they're getting multiple generations of discipleship and influence as you bring them in. Really cool. Well, thanks for spending some time down memory lane with me as I kind of, you're 10 years ahead, so I get to kind of ask that. Let's move on though to the last topic I wanted to ask you about. And you are one of the chairmen of the National Christian Foundation and helping with that, NCF, and I know that you and Ryan, have created several funds in your community to help. I'm curious, like, this is the Kingdom REI podcast, Kingdom Real Estate Investing podcast, where we're real estate investors second, we're kingdom leaders first. And I'm just, explain to me what else you have, like, what has this business elevation allowed you to do from a kingdom standpoint? And then what's ahead? Like, you know, what are the things that this has allowed you to do in the community? Just because, and the reason I say this, one of the reasons we started this show for you and for our listeners listening is there are very few places and there are very few examples, which is why I want to interview you and interview the 100 other people we've interviewed thus far, is that where you can, where both of those things are celebrated, that actually entrepreneurship, business, real estate, investing can be a platform for kingdom influence. And so what has this business allowed you to do from a kingdom standpoint, and what's next for you guys in terms of where you're headed?
Yes, I think it's really allowed us to live out our calling. So this business, when you say, and let me go back and say that again. So like when we look at elevation and we look at what we've done with it, we just view it as a huge opportunity to live out what we've been called to do. So it's like, we're able to, on one hand, serve people with affordable housing that need it. We love that. And then on the other hand, because we're doing that well, we're able to serve our investor community well. And so they're able to do everything from support their families, put their kids through college, give in different ways, which is, you referenced that a little bit with the NCF type element. So I think it's just allowed us to live out our kingdom purpose in the marketplace. And I think that that's influenced a variety of things in our community that we're humbled to be a part of. For example, like you said, we've got a number of giving groups in the Orlando community. And basically, they are 12 local people linking arms to be the hands and feet of Jesus in our community. And we come alongside folks with what we hope is a life-changing gift. So those gifts can range, it could be 30,000 to one family. And I'll just give you an example, that might allow us to serve that family by helping them put a down payment on their home. It might help us serve a family by making sure they've got tuition covered or different types of things that those families may need, transportation. So that those are, out of the business, proceeds are made available that we are able to deploy in a way that we hope advances the kingdom. And it's been incredible to do that in community. That's why I specifically mentioned those giving groups, because there's different things we can do in private. There's different types of investments that we can make or giving investments as well. But at the same time too, there's something powerful about linking arms with people in your community and living it out. So that's been just incredibly rewarding. And I think that there's more to come on that. Ryan and I were just working on that with the president of NCF here in Orlando. We just had a call on that last Friday on what else we would like to be a part of here in our community. And so I think there's some, when you say what's ahead or what's next, I'm actually really excited for what's next. And we're just really eager to partner with people that, have the mind and the heart of the kingdom, but are also strategic and want to see things move, not just throw money at a problem or just write a check and feel good about it. I mean, we're just talking about really strategic improvements in our area. So We're excited about that.
The giving group, real quick, you said you guys come together and you give, like it's a once a year thing. You do this quarterly. What does that look like?
Yes, these groups are formed and the ones, and it's non-prescriptive. So if someone were to form a group, they could do it differently if they'd like. The groups that we're a part of have 12 individuals. We meet 2 times a year. Each individual has a buy-in. So they might buy in for $1,000 or $2,500 or $5,000, whatever the group decides. And then that amount is pooled into one gift that's given to one family. So we don't split it more than 2. So it's either one family or 2 families, so that way the size of the gift remains large enough that it could make a meaningful impact on the family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you guys do that. Do you use a donor advised fund to help facilitate that?
We do use our donor advised fund to help facilitate our giving. And then the ultimate gift is given through a nonprofit to the individual.
Got it. Amazing. Wow. Yeah. So that's cool to think about. And I even think about from a community standpoint, we've been talking about this a lot of, what would that look like? We're in San Diego to kind of build this community of giving groups that could be an extension throughout our city. So I love what you guys have done there in Orlando, because what I notice about you all, from your home to your business, like everything, like it feels like a pillar of the city. Like you all, like the way I see you and Ryan is like a real pillar of Orlando. And I think that's something as a kingdom leader to really strive for, is like, does your community or your city or your town see you as a pillar because of the blessing that your business extends, not just to, I mean, you're extending blessing to your consumer, both your tenant and your investor, but that also has now extended into the city as well. And I think that is something to aspire to, is like, are we building a business with excellence that will now be a blessing? I mean, there is a proverb, when the righteous prosper, the city flourishes.
Mm.
And I just think that is something, like, the righteous should prosper, right? Because as you prosper, the city around you really truly can flourish. And so thanks for being that example. I just wanted to say that to you, but in front of everyone, that like, you guys are for me, it's something to aspire to, because I see you prospering. But as you prosper, the city around you really is flourishing, and including our Kingdom or Ag community has flourished because of you both. So thank you for that as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's really an honor to be a part of, just to be a part of all of this. And thank you for your very, very kind words. And I will tell you, just on that last thing you were saying, I will say, when you talked earlier about, the 50 million to over a 500 million, what you just spoke about is really an underlying driver for us, because it fills our heart to know that as the business has grown, the impact has also grown. And so we find that personally very, very encouraging and motivating.
Jamie, please, before you go, tell folks where to go learn about you or follow you personally. If they just want to, hey, I want to know more about Jamie, how do I go follow her? And then, of course, about Elevation, if you would please give both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that's listening can come to our website. It's elevationfund.com. And if you want to email me, you are welcome to do that. I'm happy to answer any questions. My email is Jamie, JAMIE, at elevationcg.com. And I hope, Ellis, I hope that's a sufficient.
Yes, that's right. Are you on social media? Do you do like Instagram or LinkedIn or anything where like that, where you post content?
Yes, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm not an Instagrammer.
Okay. No TikToks or anything like that.
No,
So Facebook. All right, so they can go find you on Facebook. Jamie, thanks so much again for your time. And everyone, again, remember the competition. Please go share this. Like, even tag Ryan and like, this was way better than your episode, Ryan. If you've been listening since season 1, I personally think this was amazing. I learned so much, and it was different. I'm glad we now have had both of you, because I think both of you combined have really been mentors in my life. So thankful to have you. Again, everybody, if you love this, go share this with someone. Go tag Jamie, myself, either on LinkedIn or Facebook. And we thanks for listening. See you next week.